Just in the chat and in the show of hands, how many of you actually read the book? Because I just wanted to see what type of audience we have. Oh, okay, Micah, you have. Lorenzo is out. Jonathan, did you read, or Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. I did read it, and I started going back through it a couple of days ago, because I read it a month
okay.
ago, and I just went back and tried to pick up the highlights. Yep.
Okay. So, okay. Well, I'm gonna try to read some portions, but we'll see how it goes. I don't really know how to do this. Kind of like when you have a book, there's so much material, and I wanted to give it kind of a presentation that would both allow people that haven't read it to participate in it, but at the same time give enough discussion for folks to come in. So let's see how it goes. Obviously, this is not a book club, but it sounds like most of you guys have read. I really just wanted to pick out 5 main themes that I got from the book that I found very fascinating. So first of all, this is obviously it's been one of the most how do you call it, awarded books in especially Chinese sci-fi. I didn't know about it until I think one of you guys recommended, and I don't know if it was Micah or Jonathan, and I put out a survey like, which book should I be reading, and then somebody said Three Body Problem, and as I started reading, I realized, okay, I know now why this is the case. And so I thought in many ways was surprising. I think the best review actually came from President Barack Obama, that basically said widely imaginative, uh, which in some ways sums up. There was just really a lot there. And I feel like preparing for this, I had to reread a lot of stuff. So let me kind of start a little bit with, the book starts a little bit with Chinese history. So I wanted to go there, which, was a part of the Cultural Revolution. And, very interesting historical time in China. Again, I'm not necessarily a China expert or anything, but I thought the book brought a little bit of that historical period. And, for many of us who are not familiar, it was basically a period of purging and changing culture. And one of the things that the book depicts is some of these sessions where they would basically kind of have people come up and try to get them to basically change their views. And the main character here, her dad, kind of goes through this experience. And so I'm actually just going to read that section, and then maybe what we can do is I will open, because as much as I like to hear my voice, I would like to hear you guys speak as well. So let's see how this goes. So I'm in page 18. I don't know if you have your book, but I'll go ahead and read this part. And so just to set up the stage for those who haven't read it, this portion, her dad, Professor Yan, I believe, is being questioned by teenagers, and basically they are questioning his science, what he teaches, and basically accusing him of teaching capitalism through the science that he's teaching. And then they come upon this part on the Big Bang theory. So it starts. You also taught the Big Bang theory. This is the most reactionary of all scientific theories. One of the male Red Guards spoke up, trying to change the subject. Maybe in the future, this theory will be disproven. But 2 great cosmological discoveries of the century, Hubble's law and observation of the cosmic microwave background, show that the Big Bang theory is currently the most plausible explanation for the origin of the universe. Lies, Shaolin shouted. Shaolin, who is actually that individual's wife. Then she began a long lecture about the Big Bang theory, remembering to splice in insightful critiques of the theory's extremely reactionary nature. But the freshness of the theory attracted the most intelligent of the 4 girls, who couldn't help but ask, time began with a singularity? So what was there before the singularity? Nothing, Yi said, the way he would answer a question from any curious young person. He turned to look at the girl kindly. With his injuries on the tall iron hat, the motion was very difficult. No, nothing. That's reactionary, completely reactionary, the frightened girl shouted. She turned to Shaolin, who gladly came to her aid. The theory leaps open a place to be filled by God, Shao noted at the girl. A young red guard, confused by these new thoughts, finally found her footing. She raised her hand, still holding the belt, and pointed at you. You are trying to say that God exists. I don't know. What? I'm saying I don't know. If by God you mean some kind of super consciousness outside the universe, I don't know if it exists or not. Science has given no evidence either way. Actually, in this nightmarish moment, Yi was leaning toward believing that God did not exist. This extremely reactionary statement caused a commotion in the crowd. Led by one of the red guards on the stage, another tide of slogan shouting exploded. Down with the reactionary academic authority Yi Zetai. Down with all reactionary academic authorities. Once the slogans died down, the girl shouted, God does not exist. All religions are tools concocted by the ruling class to paralyze the spirit of the people. This is a very one-sided view, Yu said it calmly. The young red guard, embarrassed and angry, reached the conclusion that against this dangerous enemy, all talk was useless. She picked up her belt and rushed at Yi, and her three companions followed. Yi was tall, and 4 14-year-olds had to swing their belts upward to reach his head, still held high. After a few strikes, the tall iron hat, which had protected him, fell off. The continued barrage of strikes of the metal box finally made him fall down. The young guards, encouraged by the success, became even more devoted to this glorious struggles. They were fighting for faith, for ideals. Yi's two students had finally had enough. The chairman instructed us to rely on eloquence rather than violence. They rushed over and pulled the 4 semi-crazed girls off Yi, but it was already too late. The physicist lay quietly on the ground, his eyes still open and blood oozed from his head. The frenzied crowd sank into silence. The only thing that moved was a thin stream of blood. Like a red snake, it slowly meandered across the stage, reached the edge, and dripped into a chest below. So, quite a way to start the book. I wanted to see if I can't see you guys' faces for some reason. I'm trying to find my footing here. I want to see if any of you guys have any comments on this or any thoughts of kind of anything that elicits from this reading.
I think this reinforces this sense that I've had lately that there is actually something fundamentally incompatible with not necessarily socialism, but just communism and Christianity. I think any religion in general becomes the target of hostility from like a Marxist framework, basically. And like, yeah, so like, I think this paragraph kind of illustrates that very well.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was a whole lot of irony when we talk about using eloquence instead of violence. But then in the same breath or just before, it was saying there's no point talking with people. And I couldn't help but, coming as you know, from a kind of small government perspective and wanting to see, I guess, free thought and freedom of expression, that these are things that cause emergence, which is a fundamental good thing, and decentralization of power. I guess that whole passage just fed into all my pre-existing political biases, if you like.
So I was thinking about the irony of how this is a kind of fundamentalism being expressed that wants to throw something off because it provides a place for God. The same view was opposed by another group of fundamentalists with which I'm much more intimately familiar because it removed the place of God, right? And so the fact that such a view could engender such radically different belief responses and similar sorts of reactions, is kind of interesting. That science can provoke a religious response on essentially on multiple sides, or a fundamentalist response on multiple sides. So that's the background from which I would reflect on this. I can hear people that I know saying similar things, but having very different content to those words, I guess.
Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting too. Yeah, the irony that I guess what got him in trouble was he's teaching science, right? And then that specific science is seen as reactionary, and then it ends up leading to kind of belief in God. And I don't know much about the author, and what his thoughts are, but I just thought, yeah, I thought it was an interesting and unusual combination there. That I think that was probably for me one of the first like striking scene, and first the writing too. I thought it was just nice how they ended. I mean, it was a gruesome picture, but at the same time, kind of there was a little bit of poetry at the end, kind of like it's like the blood is dripping and that's the only sound. So it's almost like that there is from the author, there is this condemnation, like there's this condemnation of what's happening here, and this recognition that something something is not right with what just happened. So I thought, and then let's be honest, right? I mean, it's kind of funny because in these times, science is being challenged in other ways, right? And so fundamentalism can really turn in different ways, whether it is, in this case, a cultural revolution, whether it is anti-vaccines or against other things. So it's I don't know. Any Jan, do you anything you want to say?
Yeah. So the Cultural Revolution period is the darkest period in China. So even the current government right now criticize that kind of period. And I just want to say something about the background. So at that time, President Mao, he wants to control everything in China. That's why he say something bad about religion, about God, because he wants his own status living every Chinese people's heart. So at that time, not only religion was criticized, but also science, biology, chemistry, all the things, all the ideologies are being banned because they want everybody's heart is fully occupied by himself. So I think the contrast during this part, the main idea about the author is try to show you guys like how dark that period is and how much control President Mao to all Chinese people. However, I think for the religion in general, in China, we don't have religion, even right now. We don't believe in God, and because the main focus of Chinese government is Marxism, and and so no matter what time, either Cultural Revolution time or current time, religion is not what most Chinese people believe. It's just during the Cultural Revolution, those kind of things more like intense.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that we have your view here, Anne, to kind of help us navigate this. And
yeah, thank you so much for your perspective.
And
no problem.
Thanks for coming in, a group of strangers, and allowing us to talk about Chinese history and then helping us with that. So no, this is very helpful. So well, great. So this is my first kind of, let's call it snapshot, right? I wanted to go to the next one. How do I share this again? Did you? Did you pause it, Mike, or how do I? Oh, I resume. Never mind. I can do this. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. This one was kind of really cool. It's the part when we're talking about, so the protagonist now is meeting this group of I guess frontiers of science, right? And they are looking into the limits of science itself, right? And the picture here actually is of the China CCTV, the Chinese TV, and this portion of the book actually happens. He's actually in this area, so I put the picture here because I thought it's kind of like a way to put the visual. But he talks about as he's talking about the limits of science, he talks about how the shooter and the farmer, and I wanted to read this because I thought that was again, I think it applies obviously to science, but it could apply to just reality in general and philosophy. So this is in page 74. So this is the physicist. Gosh, I can never. Is it Yan? Yeah, Yang. No, Wang Yao. He is. So he finally had some discoveries. I think he's starting to have some visions and everything, and it's just pushing him to think about things deeply, about life and existence. So in page 74, he starts, can the fundamental nature of matter really be lawlessness? Can the stability and order of the world be but a temporary dynamic equilibrium achieved in a corner of the universe, a short-lived eddy in a chaotic current? Without realizing, he found himself at the foot of the newly completed China Central Television building. He stopped at the side of the road and lifted his head to gaze up at the gigantic A-shaped tower, trying to capture the feeling of stability. His gaze followed the sharp tip of the building, gleaming in the morning sunlight, pointing toward the blue, bottomless depths of the sky. Two words suddenly floated into his consciousness: shooter and farmer. When the members of the frontier of science discuss physics, they often use the abbreviation SF. They didn't mean science fiction, but the two words shooter and farmer. This was a reference to two hypotheses, both involving the fundamental nature of the laws of the universe. In the shooter hypothesis, a good marksman shoots at a target, creating a hole every 10 centimeters. Now, suppose the surface of the target is inhabited by intelligent two-dimensional creatures. Their scientists, after observing the universe, discover a great law. There exists a hole in the universe every 10 centimeters. They have mistaken the result of the marksman's momentary whim for an unalterable law of the universe. The farmer hypothesis, on the other hand, has the flavor of a horror story. Every morning on a turkey farm, the farmer comes to feed the turkeys. A scientist turkey, having observed this pattern to hold without change for almost a year, makes the following discovery. Every morning at 11, food arrives. On the morning of Thanksgiving, the scientists announced this law to the other turkeys, but that morning at 11, food doesn't arrive. Instead, the farmer comes and kills the entire flock. Wang felt the road beneath the feet shift like quicksand. A-shaped buildings seemed to wobble and sway. He quickly brought his gaze back to the street. So on this one, I think, not really sure how to categorize both the farmer and the turkey, right? But in one, I think the farmer is kind of like, here we are making assumptions when there is some type of rational force doing something all along. So maybe this could be, in my mind, the idea that there is either creator or being, right? That's creating life, and then we come around and science and just say, oh, okay, we're just describing what it is. So I think in some ways that is kind of the science, maybe science religion duality, right? That comes in between the two. The Turkey one is a little bit nihilist. I don't know, in my view, right? It's like, it just seems fatalistic, right? It's just you're there, you're being fed, but at the end of the day, you're being fed just so you can be eaten. So it's almost like, senseless. I don't know. So I wonder if if you guys have any thoughts on that, or even, and I'm putting here the picture because obviously he's, the scene is happening right in front of this building. Anything you guys, comments you may have around the farmer, the shooter, or the A building?
This reminds me of the Turkey problem that Nassim Taleb talks about in The Black Swan. For those of you who don't know, Taleb is like a famous financial theorist, I guess, who very much, it was one of the few that kind of sort of predicted the financial crisis coming. And he became kind of like a famous author talking about low probability, high impact events, and bringing math for complex systems to kind of explain this. And he says that fundamentally part of the problem is why experts can only manage society up until a point, is that like experts are good at extrapolating past data into the future. And that makes sense if you think that the future, the shape of the probabilities looks like the kind of bell curve that we see for height. Taleb disagrees. He says that that's mostly how it operates on a day-to-day basis, but the most impactful things that end up actually having the biggest impact, like the 20% of events that are 80% of history, end up being like black swans, like these things that you just could not really effectively anticipated. COVID being the primary example, but also even like historically traumatic events like 9/11, talk about in terms of like forcing everybody to radically update their viewpoint of the world. And Taleb is saying that, fundamentally you cannot fully predict, these things. And even though they're the minority of the events that happen in history, they end up becoming the most impactful things in history. So it's almost pointless to try to just develop models, right, that extrapolate from the past into the future in a very naive way. I think this is very similar, and I think it fits into the broader themes of the novel, right? In terms of like, even like a highly competent government can only go so far because fundamentally some of the problems are that hard.
Yeah, that's right.
So something that that this makes me think about is kind of debate between two schools of thought that are kind of characterized by Nick Bostrom and David Deutsch. And so Nick Bostrom is a Future of Humanities Institute at or Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford, and David Deutsch is a physicist from Oxford, and they have very different views about the future. And Bostrom's view is about estimating these kind of black swan events. So are we going to create rogue AI and destroy ourselves and wipe out the universe or something like this, right? And so he uses this analogy of pulling marbles out of a hat, and you keep pulling white marbles out, and one day you're going to pull a black marble out, and then it's going to destroy everything, right? And so if you do this, right, then you're kind of like just counting down to this, like sometime you're going to pull out like a existential risk marble, and that's going to be it unless you are radically prepared, right? So this is like this is a way of thinking about things that really heavily prioritizes risk mitigation. and particularly these big existential risks that could wipe out all life on Earth, all, and everywhere. David Deutsch really rejects this idea because in his view, the way our knowledge works and the way the things we do operates in the universe is not a sort of random pulling from a cosmic lottery, right? It's not that we're just pulling a bunch of events out. We're actually explaining the universe. And so when we try to do something that's potentially big and risky, we have explained it already to some degree. So when we did the first nuclear bomb, right, we had an idea about the ramifications of it. There was some discussion, will this catch the atmosphere on fire and burn up? But we had an explanation that said no, that won't happen. When we turned on, much less violent idea, when we turned on one of the super colliders, right, at CERN, this was a question: is this going to hit some kind of cosmic reset switch and eradicate the whole universe? Right, this was a question that people were asking, and
yeah, like accidentally making a black hole.
Right, yeah. So and Deutsch's answer is no. Our explanations of physics, as we understand them, say that's not what's going to happen. We don't have any plausible other explanation where that actually does happen. So just the fact that you can randomly conjure up that, just because like it could be that a farmer's coming along to shoot us, or that we're about to pull, we can't act on that because those things are always there. If we're just going to assume a random event could happen at any time, we have to act on the best explanations we've got. So these are two radically different ideas based on whether essentially a sort of trust in our ability to explain the universe versus a trust in, like, a distrust of that. Nick Bostrom is essentially saying we don't know what kind of rabbits we're about to pull out of this hat, and Deutsch says, we're going to be surprised, but our ability to explain the universe and to use science means that it's not that random and risky. We can actually move ahead with the best explanations we know of for now.
Okay, good stuff. A lot of I'm actually learning quite a bit now with you guys. So this is interesting. Anybody else, or else we'll go to the next slide. Okay, all right, let me go to the next one. I don't know if we'll be able to finish all. I am surprisingly awake at 10:30 at night, so I'm good. But I know we probably want to stay into a 1 hour. So let's see, what is the next one? Moral questions. Yeah, this one is kind of nice. Nope, wrong way. It's what happens when you try to use Prezi instead of okay. Aha. Okay, this one is really the crux of the book, right? It sounds like everybody here has read the book. So what I'm gonna do is, instead of reading the passage, and also see if we can cover a little more ground, I will just set up the question, since it looks like everybody's familiar with the story. So I thought, this is really, it has to do with Ye's decision to essentially send off that message. She goes through this philosophical awakening, and she realizes that she's now able to send message to the Trisolaris civilization, and in a split second she decides that she will basically betray the whole human race, basically invite this alien force to come in. And I think, and especially in the way that she sets her message, I think in 274, I think it is betraying, but it's also, so basically she said, the message that was winging in the sunset, come here, I will help you conquer this world. Our civilization is no longer capable of solving its own problems. we need your force to intervene, right? So I think there's a dual thing going on. So on one hand, there's definitely the sense of total loss of faith in humanity. But on the other, it also almost like this faith on an external force, right? And in this case, the faith in external force is on an alien civilization, but one could very well replace that with a faith in, a supernatural being. So in some ways, it's almost like a religious faith in an alien civilization. But the question that I wanted to ask is really kind of turning inwards a little bit, because we can't make this too easy. I want to ask this group, what would it take for you? What would have to happen? And I know, again, this is hypothetical, so don't get too caught up. But what would have to happen for you to really lose all hope in humanity and to actually, let's say, send a message to an alien civilization to come take over? What would be the thing that would just, drive you to that? And to be honest, since this is a difficult question, let me take a crack on it. I think I haven't lost faith in all humanity, I gotta say. I'm not that pessimistic, but I believe that if there's one thing right now that really makes me question humanity is our disregard for future generations through the way we treat the environment, Earth, and not just the environment, but really each other. It's both how we treat each other, but specifically the lack of long-term view. That to me, I'm not sure if that would drive me to want to betray the human race, but when I see more of that, that's when I think we need some type of intervention, right? Maybe that's a better way to say, like, this won't go away on its own. We need some help. So that would be my answer, my very inadequate answer. So I want to see if anybody will dare answer this one. So who would like to go next?
I'm not sure that I would characterize Yi's actions as betrayal. I think they were motivated from a good place. I think betrayal is when someone says, "Okay, you pay me $1 million and I'll give you some government secrets." That's betrayal for self-interest. What Yi was doing was coming from a good place. She was assuming that, and it's an assumption that we make as one of the foundational assumptions in Christian Transhumanism, the assumption that is that the more powerful and advanced people get, the more ethical they get. And that can be seen to some extent from Steven Pinker's work, but it's not a universal thing. So what I saw it as, I see it as looking for the savior external to humanity, but I don't mean to exclude God from that, but God being the kingdom of God with us. But it's looking for, it's kind of like Israel's sin in asking for a king, which I've been thinking about, and that's something that goes on in the same way we're looking for a government to save us or a political system to save us. What we need is the kingdom of God is the reform of human nature. And if you go back to the time in Israel before there were kings, there were judges, and they arose, they emerged. Mm-hmm. That was the natural reform and improvement of human nature that was coming about. And so I think in terms of what would it take for you to betray the human race, to copy Yi's example, people are doing that all the time. They're assuming that we can invite some big government, some new big political system, some great new technology to fix the world, instead of saying what we need is to disempower all those things, because all the big government solutions that have been tried in the world have ended in failure one way or another. But the sort of small, low-level continued improvements, all the technology emerges from individuals, ideas emerge from individuals. All the growth in the big tech companies is by buying up startups. This is why we need 1,000 flowers in the field, rather than sort of one big person trying to impose righteousness from above. That's the unintentional betrayal that happens all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So thinking about that, Elias, you said kind of what this lack of belief in the future is what or lack of concern for future generations. And in a sense, it's because that is evidence of having, of the human race already having betrayed itself, right? This is they've given up on themselves, because if you are investing in the human race, you are investing in the future. There's no way that you get a return on that investment that's not in some future era, right? If I'm even if I'm being nice to the stranger on a bus or something, there's almost an implicit assumption in there that somehow that action can ripple out into the world and help others, and so forth. And it's better for me to, smile than frown at this person, right? It'll never come back to me in a finite, kind of amount of time. But so that sense that people have betrayed themselves is, I think, strong for me. And when I see people who I think have kind of seemingly had some kind of value system, but then they're ready to give that up for what I see as like short term or something like this, like that really, to me, strikes at the core of like, can I believe in the human race? Can I invest in the human race? And so that's one thought. The other thought, which kind of some of you guys were talking about, is maybe the theological idea. Like, I think there's a danger in fundamentalism where, because of loss of faith in humanity, that then we're like, okay, well, someone has to come from outside, right? And it becomes this very like distant, judgmental God, something like this, right? And I actually see this in secular transhumanism. A lot of people do turn to aliens, like the hope for aliens to like solve human problems. I think Christianity does something interesting here, where it's like, okay, that big God out there actually came into the human world. So if you want to look for the solution to human problems, that's where it is. You can't, every time you try to look out there, it's going to come back. And so you can't just, locate it out there and wait for somebody else to do it. I think that is something interesting that happens within Christianity that kind of comes up in this, because I think we all do have that tendency to want to look for someone else to intervene and fix the world, or like all that kind of stuff.
Like Jonathan said, like this idea, like the savior is elsewhere, which is ironic though, because in a Christian setting, the Messiah is supposed to come, like it's supposed to be humbling on some level, like, yeah, you do need help, right? You need to surrender, right? But the way I would analyze this actually is, especially because the outlook of a novel like this, right, is very much that the game theory is right. The aliens, if they're able to get in contact with us, right, are in a position of power where they would be like, the technological gap could potentially be as wide as the colonialists when they came over to the Americas, right? But at that point, it's all of humanity is experiencing this all at once, very rapidly, right? And personally, I was thinking, the Christian Transhumanist reading of this is like, yeah, I mean, assuming this happens, I'm not supposed to be afraid, right? I'm supposed, like, because I know eventually the story will end well. Maybe, right, this becomes the opportunity that as a species, we have to start using like non-violence, basically, kind of like the civil rights movement kind, to basically persuade them. Because how do we persuade a civilization that looks at us as an inferior species? We show, right, like higher level moral understanding by doing something that the game theory does not predict at all, like, which is like, you know, engaging, again, Gandhi style, even potentially, right, to overcome a militarily, technologically far more powerful civilization, not through force and violence, because we would never win that way, but through some sort of like appeal to a higher moral.
Right. Yeah.
And if you think about it, the setting of the novel kind of sets that up, where it's like, yeah, how are you supposed to have this interaction, right?
Yeah, no, there's a lot there.
Rational negotiation is not good in this context.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, and it sounds like you want to say something there.
Yeah, I feel like there is a huge distinction between yes, action and Christianity, because I think yes, action has a very bad intention. And so when I first think about this question, I can totally understand, yeah, because for me, if all my beloved ones were hurt by the humanity, I will lose I will lose faith. However, on the second thought, I'm thinking about like the assumption is that everybody is wicked. All of humans' behavior result in the tragedy of my beloved ones. However, I think in reality, evil people are a small number. There is no possibility that all human beings betrayed me and hurt my beloved ones. So I think for me, I cannot think about a time like I will betray the human race, because I have the faith that not all human race are bad.
Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, I actually agree with you with yeah, because I thought I didn't see that goodness in her heart. Because and it seems like, okay, that's what the author wants, because he leads her. She kind of sees she eventually faces, the killers of her dad, and realizes that even though they are, she doesn't get a sense of repentance from them. So that is a big deal for her. And then she makes this decision: I am gonna, betray, or I'm gonna get these aliens here, and I don't care if everybody dies, right? But then, and I didn't read it, but then right after that, she gets the news that she's pregnant. So it's almost like, there you go. You didn't believe it, but guess what? Almost like, humanity, the universe played a trick on you, and now you're about to give birth, right? And I think that pregnancy then becomes kind of in some ways, part of her process of change, even though I'm curious to see on the other books how it goes, but there is.
Do you feel that as a parent, by the way? Like, as becoming a parent made you less nihilistic about humanity?
I would say that it forced me to think more about it, right? Because now it is not an abstract idea anymore, right? I wake up every morning, I see my 3-year-old boy, I see my 8-year-old girl and 11-year-old girl, and I am confronted with the future of humanity right there, right? So it's less about this beautiful spiritual moment, right, when the baby comes. I mean, I'm just saying it's beautiful. And Micah, I'm so excited that you guys are getting there, and then there's a baby coming there. Jonathan is further ahead with me with I guess older children, but I would simply say that, and it's even further, like, because I work a lot from home, like my kids will impose themselves on me. So it's kind of like, it's no longer a choice to me. That's kind of really what it is. It's like, I cannot not think about the future, because the future is tugging at my pants and saying, Daddy, what about this? I want to play or something. So, yeah, but anyways, it's a great question, by the way. Thanks for asking that. But I thought that the juxtaposition of having her being pregnant right after she's done that was brilliant from the author. And I think it tells me that the author still has faith in humanity. So, yeah. Great. All right, let's go to the next one. What is the next one? Okay, this one is just geeking out. I'm sorry. I just had to do it because, this is cool. But the book addresses a little bit of the three body problem. So on the left here, I have a representation of the three body problem. And then I think on page 195, there is a conversation between, I guess, Wen and the other very smart, I guess, scientist or physicist. And that guy claims that he was able to solve the three body problem using a genetic algorithm, evolutionary algorithm. Which I thought was interesting. And my first thought was like, yes, so mathematically you couldn't solve it, but using probabilities and evolutionary algorithm, you could get there. You could kind of solve it. I did a little bit of research. I didn't do a lot. I didn't look for papers or anything, but I did find, I think, a recent paper, and I can put this here. But apparently, one scientist just this year put in a solution for it, which is gosh, where's the chat now? Go back here. Never mind. I'll just send it later to this group. But anyways, there was this guy who wrote a paper that's actually been able to solve the problem. So I don't know how, and maybe some of the more mathematicians here, or mathematicians and mathematics inclined folks here can help me on this. But I don't know if that is true, that you could solve the three body problem with evolutionary algorithm. I can see how it could definitely help with the probabilities and all. But I don't know. So if anybody, I just thought I'll put that in there because obviously this book, that's the part when it got really serious, and there's really serious about math, and I thought I had to mention here. So anybody have comments on that at all?
So as the resident machine learning person, okay, I guess the way I would frame it is an evolutionary algorithm, like a genetic algorithm, right? Would be very much what you would throw at a problem like this, where it's impossible to just have like a more analytical kind of computed the equations yourself type of approach. What's interesting about this is that then you can ask the question, okay, can you use artificial intelligence in general,
right,
to model these problems? And like, what ends up happening most of the time in just chaotic, I mean this in a mathematical sense, in chaotic systems, like where the butterfly effect is present, basically, that, yeah, because of the butterfly effects, like, yeah, like the model is able to predict like, something within like a short range, but then it's never able to predict anything major long-term because of the butterfly effect. Like it just gets too complex and computationally intractable, even by artificial intelligence in terms of like what we have access to today. We don't even know in terms of like how to even frame the problem in a way that artificial intelligence could solve it, efficiently. But you would throw an evolutionary algorithm at it. The hope is that the evolutionary algorithm basically doesn't get stuck at a comfortable level, instead keeps pushing towards the best solution. What's interesting about this, and this is why for even the phase three body problem ends up being used in finance, for example, is this idea that like, yeah, like the future, even if you look at stock market behavior, is very complex. It's very non-linear. There's a lot of chaos theory involved, right? And because of it, right, it tells you that like at best we're able to kind of forecast effectively, like the most effective forecasts made by stock markets, for example, are within 2 years. like predicting the next 2 years of a company's like cash flows, right? But then literally like decades out, like no, they're not very effective in terms of a predictor, which shows you that maybe, yeah, it is like very much like a three-body problem where like initially you can sort of predict the orbits, right? And then once the interactions between all these elements end up compounding on each other, like then it becomes impossible for you to basically make a sensible prediction.
Yeah, no, that
My under
Mhm.
Go ahead. I was going to say my understanding, which you know, just a little inkling of things, but my understanding is the three-body problem is Turing complete. Like it's essentially a computer. If you've got three gravitational objects, you can use them to program any kind of algorithm you want, which is exactly why. Yeah.
What?
So
Amazing.
So-
Amazing.
So you can create, so this is why it's intractable, is because it is something that it's like, can you predict what a computer will do? Well, only if you really perfectly understand what the programmer put into it, right? Like only if you actually understand what the program is itself doing. And so it, you know, it involves this kind of, you know, work of you're essentially trying to reverse engineer a problem that could have been specified to any degree. And I don't know if this is jumping off on a tangent or off topic or whatever, but I thought this was a really profound way to frame the problem of this civilization, because it's basically saying you could be in a computer system, in a chaotic system, in whatever, where everything was so unpredictable that you could just like, it would be purely intractable. You could never get a hold of what was going on scientifically in, you know, in your world, right? And so we have a situation in our world, and you know, we live in a rather tame area of the universe in some ways, where we can begin to, you know, we can take baby steps, right? And so you think about like a kid, you want to raise them in a fairly orderly environment so they can figure things out. You raise them in something that's too chaotic and they'll never be able to learn and grow. And I think that's very like interesting, because it in a way it's kind of terrifying to consider what we could have emerged in, and how, you know, our ability to, you know, to get traction on some of the problems that we've got traction on is really highly dependent on what Christians would call grace, right? We are thankful to have emerged in this situation where we have a lot we can work with and actually understand about our local environment.
I think that wonderfully illustrates, by the way, how a secular transhumanist perspective on the three-body problem is very nihilistic, despairing. It's like, you know, zombie apocalypse level, like, wow, like terrible, you know, whereas the Christian perspective is supposed to be hopeful, you know. And I think you saw that contrast in just the way he kind of characterized this. It's like, yeah, like this is potentially scary. The idea that we can be in this complex, chaotic system. And yet we're supposed to be reassured, right? Because the revelation of Jesus is supposed to be the good news.
Yeah, sounds good.
I think another main idea of this novel is about dimension. So how to say it, like if you are in a lower dimension, you cannot imagine a higher dimension. So we are now in the 3 dimensions, so we cannot imagine the 4th dimension. So the dimension idea is, you know, the main concept the author tried to convey. So if you read the following books, you will be amazed by this. So it's a very simple idea, but because of it, like the whole book will give you a surprising, you know, result. So I think the dimension part is one of the most fascinating part of this book.
That's right. I actually thought about talking about the sofa on here, but I was like, I just, my ability to even handle that, to try to discuss it was challenging. But yes, there's definitely, even in the first one, now I'm starting to read the second one, there was a whole parts basically was about, folding in dimensions to a point where, you could send this very tiny thing into the earth, and that could, start a whole, chain of events and a bunch of things. So yeah, no, that's very interesting stuff.
So one related technology that might be interesting, kind of think about this thought experiment with, basically, is what are called autoencoders. So basically, machine learning, you build like one AI, that takes like a really complex set of data, right, and simplifies it, and then you build another AI that takes the simplification, the reduced version, and is supposed to recreate the original. And in training the AIs this way, basically enables them to develop like a very, very effective, like micro representation of something otherwise like really complex, like images, like full images. They can be able to boil down to just like a sequence of numbers, like a short sequence of numbers. If you think about it that way, that's exactly the kind of stuff that the kind of technologies you would need to even be able to communicate with a higher dimensional civilization. So you see how, like, I think there is very much like the purpose. How can we steward AI, to be, it's to enable us to do something like that, right? Where like, because this happens a lot in sci-fi, like, like the scientists start to communicate by showing music and math, like the Pythagorean theorem, for example, because they think like an alien civilization will have also come across those things too. But in a way you can say is like, okay, we've created like these crazy neural networks. You know how to communicate with a neural network. It's probably basic for you, but you know how it works. And then the neural network knows how to communicate with us. Right? And it does this like, translation layer. And I think that's what you would end up kind of needing to communicate with a higher dimensional civilization, basically.
Yeah. Good. Well, let me go to our last piece, and this one I actually will read because I thought this is a good way to kind of I was surprised, I have to say, right, by some of the religious echoes that showed up throughout the book. Obviously the book was heavy on science, the book was heavy on philosophy, physics, moral, but then there was these interesting tidbits here and there, kind of, and in some ways even Christianity to a certain extent. But there's this passage here in 128, 139. I'll go ahead and read it, and then I'll actually play, because I was able to find the song that he mentions here, and I'll just play a little bit. Hopefully the audio is going to collaborate. But I just wanted us, we got really gung-ho on intellect and just geeked out on all these cool theories. Now I just want us to kind of turn a little bit more inward and just kind of contemplate this interesting part of the writing here. So that's page 128. It says, Wang took out his mobile and dialed Shen Yufei's number. She picked up right away. Perhaps she was also suffering from insomnia. What happens at the end of the countdown? I don't know. She hung up. What can it be? Maybe my own death, like Yang Dong's. Or maybe it will be a disaster like the great tsunami that swept through the Indian Ocean more than a decade ago. No one would connect it to my nanotech research. Could it be that every previous great disaster, including the World War, was the result of reaching the end of ghostly countdowns? Could it be that every time there was someone like me who no one thought of, who bore the ultimate responsibility? Or maybe signals the end of the whole world. In this perverse world, that would be a relief. One thing was certain, no matter what was the end of the countdown, in the remaining 1,000 or so hours, the possibilities would torture him cruelly, like demons, until he suffered a complete mental breakdown. Wang ducked back into the car and left the planetarium. Just before dawn, the roads were relatively empty, but he didn't dare to drive too fast, feeling that the faster the car moved, the faster the countdown would go. When a glimmer of light appeared in the eastern sky, he parked and walked around aimlessly. His mind was empty of thoughts. Only the countdown posed against the dim red background of cosmic radiation. He seemed to have turned into nothing but a simple timer, a bell that tolled for he knew not whom. The sky brightened. He was tired, so he sat down on a bench. When he lifted his head to see where his subconscious had brought him, he shivered. He sat in front of St. Joseph's Church at Wangfujing. In the pale white light of dawn, the church Romanesque vaults appeared as three giant fingers pointing out something in space for him. As Wayne got up to leave, he was held back by a snippet of hymnal music. It wasn't Sunday, so it was likely a choir rehearsal. The song was Come, Gracious Spirit, Heavenly Dove. As he listened to the solemn sacred music, Wang Yao once again felt that the universe had shrunk until it was the size of an empty church. The domed ceilings was hidden by the flashing red light of the background radiation, and he was an ant crawling through the cracks in the floor. He felt a giant invisible hand caressing his trembling heart, and he was once again a helpless babe. Something deep in him, his mind, that had once held him softened like wax and collapsed. He covered his eyes and began to cry. Let me try this, and if you guys tell me if the if this works. Let's see. Can you hear the sound? Sorry to end abruptly, but I know we're kind of in our ending here. I was really moved by that scene, and then I came to find that, don't you love technology? Like, I can give you the picture that he's talking about, that was the church that he was talking about, and I can give you the song that he mentioned. So it's like we're reading literature and we can actually bring it alive. But I don't know why he put that in there, but I just felt that it you know, there was at least a nod to this idea. Look, there is hope, even in the midst of so much confusion. And in this case, he used the scenario of a church, which I thought was, again, very interesting. And then when I heard this music, beautiful music, I don't know. I think he helped me become a better Christian because of that. I don't think there's any other way of saying than that. I was able to connect, and again, I don't even know if he professes Christianity or whatever, but by reading that, he helped me connect with the divine. So, and I think that's what great literature does in many ways. But I know, just wanted to hear from you guys' thoughts or reactions or on this section.
Yeah, I think when I think about hope, honestly, I think about Barack Obama, because I moved to America right when he got elected. And so, I was in high school debates, I was like following and stuff. And like, he would always reference, the kind of hope that like Americans of all like different kind of social contexts, right, have had to experience, right? Whether it's, Native Americans, whether it's slaves around a campfire. That's a refrain that he always uses in terms of hoping in things unseen. When how could you possibly visualize a better world when you're in that state? And yet the ability for Christianity specifically, like the gospel, to make people in those situations feel like, oh, like there's still a future worth hoping for. That to me is what gives me the kind of reaction that I think you described, in this passage, right? Like in a very similar way, I'm literally like, wow, if it's that impactful to them, right? Like, it's a great reminder that we should all be super hopeful, right? Even especially because hope shines brightest in the darkness.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, look, I thought the whole book was just a masterpiece. And it's stunningly well written and thoughtful. I'm certainly going to read it a second time because I think you need to really understand all the twists. And I'd even like to look up the book Silent Spring, where she mentions that and mentions in that there's the hope for salvation to come from external to humanity. So it's worth some of these tiny little one-line sentences that you have to read so carefully to understand the author's insights. I think it's a tremendous work of art.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan. Anybody else?
Yeah, I don't have. I'll just reiterate what they said. I think that's it's a lot that's beautiful here, and it is the significance of hope and being able to find that in something is incredibly powerful. And yeah, I think the ways that comes to us are always mysterious and always profound and transformative.
Yeah, I also like the music. It's really soothing. The book itself, the first book, kind of let us lost hope and fear. I feel fear when I read it, but this music is really peaceful and bring peace. I really like it.
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody. Special thanks to Yan, who I literally texted her like an hour ago and said, "Hey, I'm talking about this book we had mentioned at work." I had mentioned to her that I read it, and she mentioned she had read it. So thank you so much for taking time to come. Of course, you're always welcome. We don't always talk about three-body problem, but you're always welcome to join us. We have this.
Yeah, and thank you for coming.
Yeah, no problem. I really enjoy it. Reading book is one of the most fun thing to do during pandemic. Yeah, thank you for inviting me here.
Yeah. So thank you for.
Thanks for your insights. And
And so we had Yan from California, Jonathan from Australia, Micah from Nashville, Micah and Emily, Lorenzo from the great state of South Carolina, myself from Atlanta. Again, thank you guys. I learned so much, and I hope that that this helped you guys think more. And yeah, definitely welcome to read again. And of course, there's 2 additional ones to this. I'm starting to read the second one, so we may have to do another session on the Dark Forest, and then the third one that I want to take a look. But so yeah, and if we do that, I'll make sure to let you know.
Sure. The second, third one is much better than the first one even.
Really? Okay, that's good to hear.
no, that's great.
Yeah. No, that's great to hear. I did think that at the end, yeah, it is kind of like, oh my gosh, at the end, but then, it's like humanity, we're bugs, but then it also like, well, but bugs are everywhere. I thought there was this little twist that kind of says we're gonna live on. Like there was a nod of hope there. But anyways, we'll I know it's late. Thanks again. I don't know, Micah, if you want to say anything to close us off, but again, appreciate everybody, and looking forward to doing this again next month. I don't know. I guess Jonathan, you're going to be talking, right? What are you talking about next month? Or
I'll be something totally different. The current best scientific understandings of life extension and where the technology is likely to head in the coming sort of couple of decades.
Great. That will be looking forward to
It's
it.
a core transhumanist topic.
Yeah.
But equally,
I think that should be. Sorry.
No, go on. Yep.
I was just going to say September 2nd, same time, 9 p.m. Central Time, and adjust according to your time zone and calendar and so forth. But yeah, so definitely looking forward to that. And yeah, I think it would be great for us to continue on with these books at a later time too, or perhaps even other books. So I know that there's a lot of things that other people are thinking about. But yeah, definitely join us for next month with Jonathan's talk on life extension.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. And
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Elias.
Thanks.
Have a good night.